Okay, very good. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and then thank you for joining us again. I'm Ron Clough. I'm with Manufacturing Works, and we're here once again with our member On Technology Partners and Ken Fanger from that company, the president of On Technology, to lead us through the third part of a three-part series on cybersecurity. And this part is specific to talking about CMMC and some of the things that you'll need to know for the implementation of that requirement if you're a contractor or a subcontractor to the Department of Defense. We do have, as I mentioned, two other sections, the first and second, the beginning and intermediate, and feel free to go to our YouTube page, our YouTube channel at Manufacturing Works, and we have each of these posted already, and you can review that material. A couple of housekeeping items very quickly, and many of you have been on the others. Just a reminder, interruptions we ask for them. So feel free to jump in, turn your camera on, ask a question, put it in the chat box. We'll be monitoring it. Any way you like to interrupt, this is for you. You can ask and be as specific as you want for your organization, or maybe you're asking for a friend. Feel free to ask for a friend. Let's see, our sponsor for all of our technology related webinars is Team Neo. And Team Neo is also the sponsor of the Smart Manufacturing Cluster, of which Manufacturing Work is both a member and an active member in that. And here to tell us a little bit more about the Smart Manufacturing Cluster is Rick Earls, who's the Program Manager for Industry and Innovation at Team Neo.
You're muted, Rick.
How's that?
Much better.
Hate that. At any rate, thanks, Ron, for your patience. At any rate, let me say a little bit about Team Neo first. So Team Neo is a private nonprofit economic development organization accelerating business growth and job creation throughout the 18 counties of Northeast Ohio region. As a designated Jobs Ohio network partner, we align and amplify local economic development efforts in the region's 18 counties. We conduct research and data analysis to inform local conversations and influence solutions. We market Northeast Ohio region, and we work to increase access to jobs, education, and training for the region's 4.3 million people. We do this to build a more vibrant regional economy, one that's more talented, equitable, competitive, innovative, resilient, and prosperous. Now, in my role at Team Neo, I have a tendency to focus specifically on the Smart Manufacturing Cluster. So let me say a few words about the cluster itself. The Smart Manufacturing Cluster of Northeast Ohio accelerates the growth and competitiveness of the Northeast Ohio economy through the implementation of smart manufacturing and innovation that leverages the region's rich manufacturing heritage. And we've got plenty of unique assets here and talented workforce. We lead the development of innovation roadmaps and serve as a platform for the region's manufacturing blueprint, which you may have seen announced about a month ago, to accelerate adoption and maximize the value of technology. We connect knowledge, experience, tools, and networks with manufacturers to generate demand, increase productivity, spur product innovation, and develop the talent and resources necessary to drive technology implementation and innovation. Now, as a manufacturer, if you are interested in implementing data-driven manufacturing into your operations, we can help you in that process, which begins with a data-driven manufacturing readiness assessment that is available on the Smart Manufacturing website. Once the quick survey is taken, we can then provide assistance in your understanding of the basic concepts, help you identify opportunities for pilot projects, introduce you to solution providers, help find training services, help with employment services, and help find potential programs for financial assistance. You can take the DDM readiness assessment on your own, or I can walk you through the questions personally. Either way, we will follow up to your response to make sure you get the help you need from all the Northeast Ohio regional partners to begin your digital transformation journey. So again, if you have any questions about that, you can give myself or Erica, or for that matter, even Ron, a call. We can direct you to all the necessary services and support that you need to be able to go and implement your own data-driven manufacturing process. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Rick. Rick and I were just on a couple of calls this morning. One of them, a lot of us know we work with, on the data-driven side, the metal manufacturers. We work with plastics, chemicals, food and beverage. And it was interesting. We were on a call with the MEP. Our local MEP is Magnet. Many of you know Magnet and have used their services. The MEP up in Toledo is CIFT, C-I-F-T. And they are basically food related. And so we were talking about, we have about 500 manufacturers here in Northeast Ohio. And like many people, they're having problems staffing and keeping people, and using data and analyzing it and looking at processes and automation is something that everyone is interested right now because of some of the issues that you all face. So with that, let me go back to introducing Ken Fanger, who's, as I mentioned, the president of On Technology Partners. The company was founded by his wife many, many years ago. And so they are a female certified business in Cleveland. And they have multiple accounts in Cleveland. Probably two most notable is the City of Cleveland and Cleveland Municipal Power. And they are also, he's been with, associated with Jumpstart since their inception about 15 or 16 years ago. So a lot of experience in the consulting world, in IT, local from Lyndhurst, Miami University graduate, BS in decision science, and then went on to his MBA at Michigan State and had an emphasis in supply chain management, has been working with manufacturers for many years. So he knows at least some of the pains that many of you go through to get through a given week or a month. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Ken Fanger.
Thank you very much, Ron. Yeah, I want to take a little extra time here and kind of talk about my background, just because how it relates to the CMMC, which is brand new. And like all things in the government that are brand new, there's going to be a lot of stumbles and hurdles in this journey. But you can look for what the government has done in other areas to understand what's coming in this area. So I have worked in pharmaceutical in my past. Many of you may have remembered Benvenue Labs. That was the last job I had before I went off and became a consultant. And in that, I was responsible for making sure that we were Part 11 compliant of the FDA. And that's a major process. And it's required, again, the FDA has to come in and certify you. So I went through all the processes, built policies, helped create the structure so that we could meet the needs to be able to provide drugs to the American public. And it was a very interesting, frustrating, and annoying process. And I want to take and say right now, one of the things, and Rick reminded me to say this, is don't do this alone and don't try to just become an expert. It'll take you a long time to get the expertise you need. It'll be very expensive, and you're not going to be able to hire that. As you know, there's a hiring shortage. So cybersecurity experts are extremely hard to find. I have gone through the registered practitioner and fulfilled the requirements so that I am a registered practitioner, which means that I have the understanding of what they're looking for. And then we are looking at the manufacturing sector. And one other thing that I'm working on right now is I was hoping Sumath would be on. I don't think he's on this call, but he is in charge of technology over at Cleveland Public Power. And he and I have been working on several years to get them ready for their NIST compliance position for the power grid. So to make sure that nobody can hack and shut down all of the power in the United States, there is a requirement to meet a certain level of certification. It is, again, very onerous in many ways, but doing it is a good exercise and it's a good level of protection. So, and we are very focused on the manufacturing sector. Okay, so now let me start by, first of all, let's have some fun. Let's go do a game. I need everybody, if you'd open up your phone or a tablet and type in kahoot.it. We are going to play a little game and kind of see what you know about CMMC to start. So I'm going to share this. So if you would type in this pin on kahoot.it and then type in whatever name you want, try to keep it, child friendly. We're going to ask you a few questions, kind of get a feel for where you are. Okay, we've got some members signed up. Rick, RC, Joe, ML. And for those of you on a phone that may not be able to see, you can still go and play it. I will read off the questions and then read off the answers. We've got 7 in so far. A few other people might want to join. We'll give it about 10 more seconds and then we'll start the game. Oh, what does the chat say? It's the pin. It is 654261. So the pin is 654-2621. 654-2621. Again, that was 654-2621. Okay. I think that's good. We are going to begin. Here we go. Here's our CMMC quiz. First question, what does CMMC stand for? Compliance Method Manufacturing and Cybersecurity, Common Mild Method of Control, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, Centered Mission Multiple Correspondence. Lots of choices there. That is right. Everybody that answered it got it right. Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And we'll talk about why that word maturity is so important in this conversation. Okay, Joe is leading us with PT and ML following behind. Question number 2, the CMMC measures security at what level? 2, 3, 5, or 10? How many maturity levels are there in the cybersecurity? There are 5. Okay, I will tell you which colors are related to each item so that you are able to answer that, Aaron. Okay, there are 5. We're going to talk about 3 today. Most people will be either 1 or 3, but if you do have some advanced things, you would be moved up to 5. Okay, we've got some changes. Joe's still on top. Rick is moving up, but it's really close. Okay, true or false? CMMC will encompass multiple maturity levels that range from basic cybersecurity hygiene to advanced. Blue is true, red is false. So does it cover from basic to advanced? True or false? Blue or red? That is true. Yes, everybody got that right. And Joe is on fire. Look at him go. Question number 4. CMMC maturity level 1 requires how many processes? Red for 10, blue for 17, yellow for 130, green for 171. So is it red 10, blue 17? It is blue 17, yes. Level 3 is 130. So whoever guessed that wasn't too far off. Okay, Rick is moving up. Joe is still holding that first position. Rick is on fire. Last question. To follow basic CMMC framework, cybersecurity best practices include running frequent software updates, which is red, installing antivirus software on computers, which is blue, following robust password protocols, yellow, and green is all of the above. So is it running frequent updates? That's right, it is all of those. Okay, so let's see. Third place, we've got Joe. Second place, we got PT. And first place, we got Joe. Good job, everybody. Now I'm going to swap back to this. Okay, so that was just a fun way to kind of get into this conversation. And I want everybody to remember, we want feedback, we want interaction. So if you have questions, ask them. I will try to answer them the best I can and get you the information you need. Okay, let's take a moment and talk about what we plan to cover. So we're first going to talk about why the CMMC. Why did this come in? NIST 800-171 has existed for a long time. There have been cybersecurity requirements for a while. Why is this coming out now? That feeling of overwhelm. I want to take some time to talk about what looks like such a horrific experience. And in some ways it can be, but why working with a team can help you get through that. And then some things that you can do in preparation to be better able to take those first steps. And I'll talk about our approach and what we look for and things that you can do before you engage us. And of course, hopefully you would engage us, but it's about getting you ready to not feel so overwhelmed, to not feel so just helpless in a storm type feeling. Then I'll talk about some of the things that you can do. Then I'm going to go into keep it simple, stupid. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't give more. I don't know if any of you have ever talked with a lawyer, but when a lawyer preps you for testifying, they say, give the simplest answer possible. You want to do the same thing. When you're answering, when I used to answer the FDA, it would be a yes or no answer unless I had to share more. And then I shared the minimum I could. Don't try to over exaggerate. Don't try to over impress. Just give them what they need. They do a lot of these. They want to get it done, move on to the next one. They don't want to be overwhelmed any more than you do. Then there's a chance at $50 if you take our survey. So hopefully you will take the survey. I'm going to wait a little longer at the end of this to make sure you have a chance to, but I'll tell you who won last time's survey. So we are giving away $50. And if you don't want $50, I understand, but it seems like a waste not to take it. Let's talk why CMMC. The Cyber Maturity Model Certification came about for very specific reasons. And you probably all have heard what's been happening. Cyber attacks are going up. Thanks to COVID, they've exploded even worse than before. SolarWinds got hacked with a product they sold to the federal government. Kaseya just got hacked and affected over 1,000 clients. So this threat is growing exponentially. And the problem is it's being supported by America's enemies. Russia, Iran, Iraq, China, they're all doing state certified cyber attacks. And so these are adding problems and they're exposing the United States government to a lot of risk. They don't have a situation where bolts for airplanes can't get delivered because somebody hacked the provider. Look at the oil pipeline, shut it down. Could you imagine if we were in a national crisis and something shuts us down? They're very concerned about this growth. And again, we've seen the US government has been attacked more often. They're targeting it. Ransomware attacks, other attacks are going on trying to get in. They know that a small contractor or even a large one might be an easier door than trying to go directly at the government. So they use them to backdoor in. That's what they did with Kaseya. They got on Kaseya's system and then came into the clients they attacked. So they're afraid that they need to get everybody up to that same level of maturity on security. And this is a big one. I will tell you a great story. It always amazes me. So I was working with a manufacturing company out in Rhode Island, and they had registered themselves as ITAR compliant. And I walked in and I looked over at the secretary's desk right in the front area, and behind her was their server. And I had asked them, I said, is that your server? They said, oh yeah, that's our server. I said, you're ITAR compliant, correct? They said, yes. I said, ITAR requires that all server equipment is secured in a controlled access room. This is out in the public. They said, yeah, we're going to get to that. Well, that's part of the problem, is that we're going to get to that conversation. You don't get to it. Let's all be honest. If it's not pushed to you today, you put it off, and then it never gets done. So now let's talk about what they're looking for. They want outside confirmation. So it used to be you could self-certify. We're doing that. We're going to take care of that. We're on that. The other thing that they're looking for is proven and deployed. So you can't, this is a big thing. If you don't pass your certification, it's going to take months to prove that you're doing it. You can't just go write a policy and say, we're now compliant. That used to be how a lot of people did it. They would go, oh, okay, well, here's our policy. Now they're going to be looking for 3 things. And you're going to have to show not only that you did it, but you've been doing it for a while, because they want to see that maturity in your deployment, not just, oh, we're off and doing it. Now we're okay. And they're going to see months of performance. They want to see, when they interview the people, this is what you've been doing for a while. This is how you've been doing it. When they look at your documentation, if they look at your policies, they're going to want to see that it has been reviewed for several months, not just this is the first time we've ever touched it.
A quick question. Ken. Yeah, I just, for others, when you say outside confirmation, I'm assuming there's like an ISO type certified confirmation group that can do this. And you have to pay them to come in and do an audit on a regular basis. Could you just talk about, or maybe you're going to talk about that, but I'd like you to do a little bit on that.
I was going to talk about that briefly, but I can take a minute here.
No,
so it's a third-party auditing organization. C3PO is how they define it. And what it is it's an authorized through CMMC AB. And then they would come out, and depending on your certification level and the length of time it takes to do the certification, they would then come in and audit and certify you. And then you'd have that certification for 3 years. Now, I will tell you, and they pounded this into us in the training, if you get certified and you get a contract based on that certification, and then you stop doing the processes, they can come after you for 3 times the value of the entire contract. They are definitely holding a stick when they do this. So let's say you go and you spend 6 months and you get certified, and then you hire a new person and it says, you know what, we really don't need all that monitoring. It's costing us money. I don't want to deal with it. You do that, and then you get a check or an audit from the government, and they find out that you haven't followed, or worse, you get breached and you can't show that you've been performing these actions. They're then going to turn around and sue you again for the value of the contract and say that you failed to fulfill. And it doesn't matter if the contract they give you says that you're exempt from that. You're not allowed to get exempt from the DeFi requirements anymore. So they can't make a contract that lets you be free, even though it might say that in the contract. So be very careful on that. They emphasize that a lot in the training. You cannot get out of being responsible for keeping that certification accurate and up to date. So this is what you must do. You should prepare for the audit. We have a partner company that does a real in-depth audit review. Now, it is expensive. It's $35,000 to $45,000, but it's a very deep dive. So if you're a large organization, we'd want to talk to you about doing that. If you're a smaller organization, we'll work with you directly to get you prepared to do it. Obviously, if you're a 10,000 person company, there's a lot more involved than if you're a 10-person company. But then you have to engage a C3POA, certified third-party assessor organization, and they're going to do the assessment. When they finish the assessment, they will then turn that assessment into the CMMC authorization board. They will get it reviewed, and then you'll get certified, and they'll contact the government that you have your certification. So it is a process. It does take time. And that's how they're taking everybody through it. And they just started it this year, so they're still actually in provincial. So they haven't completely finished everything, but they are still moving forward with it as well. And then you perform your audit and you get certified. So, and then you have 3 years with that certification before you have to do it again. But take it very serious. Don't make major changes to your processes. If, once you're certified, try and keep it for the 3 years as much as you can. Sorry about that. I thought I turned off my phone. Okay. Now let's talk about why it might be overwhelming. So let's talk about first maturity level 1. Most organizations should only need to reach maturity level 1 by their estimates. Maturity level 1 is required for federal contract information. So basically anyone that's providing a federal contract service needs to have security level 1, maturity level 1. There are 6 domains that we will kind of touch on quickly. We're not going to go in depth in this presentation as far as domains. We'll talk about what domains are a little bit, and then what our practice is and what our process is. And that'll be it. There are 17 practices that we'll touch on a few so you can understand what they're for. And then if we were to move forward, if you engaged us or another company, you would do a deep dive into every single one of those practices so that you understand what it is, decide if you're actually doing it or don't need it, and then you would decide how you would make sure that you can show you've done it. And there are 0 processes, and I'll explain what a process is, but it basically is making sure that you're able to do the practices. So most of the time, the process says you have to do a policy, have a written documentation. As you move up into manage, then you also have to prove that you're actually going to pay for it. And I'll talk about that a little bit. Now, maturity level 3, and this feels very overwhelming. There are all 18 domains that you have to do. And again, we'll talk about domains. They're like access control, physical access, identification, authentication. Then there's 130 practices. So it gets very in-depth really quickly. And then there are 3 processes, and we'll talk, I actually have all 3 processes that you'll be able to see. And we'll talk about the big one, which is making sure that you can show you can fund your cybersecurity. That was a big issue during the training, is they don't want people to say they're going to put in cybersecurity and then they can't afford it down the road. They want to make sure that you're paying for the safety you need. So all of these blue are the level 1. You have access control, you have media protection, you have system and communications protection, you have physical protection. In a lot of cases, I start with people in their physical protection because you probably already have some way that you're controlling who can get into your plant. And then system and information integrity and identification and authentication. How do you make sure that the person that is supposed to be the IT director is the IT director? So those are the areas that you have to have. The big thing with domains is when you start to have policies, you have to have at least 1 policy per domain area that is being supported. So that's where that comes in. Now this is all of them, the level 3 domain. So you have the access control, incident response. So that's an important one. So if something does happen, how do you address and make sure that you remediate it? Risk management, how do you manage risk? If you have somebody, I'm doing a presentation in a few weeks for Kansas about cybersecurity and international trade. So if you're working with a country overseas and you're doing export to them, or you have a plant in another country, they might have a higher risk that you now have to address. And because they might be able to get into your system, they now are a danger point relative to the information. And I did want to take a moment. Everything we're talking about here has to do with protecting the information for the federal government, whether it's federal contract information or classified, or, oh gosh, my brain went blank, but CUI information. When you do that, you have to remember where it is. So if you're using a third party to back up your information, they are going to also have to show how they're meeting the compliance. So we use a backup product called Datto, and we actually step up on that so that you have an encryption key that you would enter. We can't see your backups. Datto can't see your backups. You are completely protected from being able to have anybody but you, but that also puts a danger on you. If you lose that key, kind of like a cryptocurrency, if you lose your cryptocurrency key, it's gone. It cannot be recovered. Your data is lost. So there is a great security level, but there's a danger that you have to take. So that would be under that risk management conversation. Understand you now are protected, but you carry the risk of losing that way to get your information back. Ron, you had a question before I move on.
Just a quick one for everyone. When we think about cloud providers, AWS and others, are they all, I mean, these are some huge companies. Are they already CMMC compliant? I mean, by using them, are you kind of in the clear? What would you ask them? How would you know that you can use them? I guess.
So, and what we're working, and we're working with partners to do this, is we are getting their security compliance statements. Some of them are SOC compliant. None of them have actually had the CMMC compliance. But the real question that comes down from this is, what is the access to the data? If they can access the data, then you have to show that you've done your due diligence in making sure that they have all the security requirements. One of the things we do is we gather and provide to you the security compliance statements from the companies to show that you've done your due diligence. Like I said, with the Datto product, they cannot see the information. So it is still encrypted to your standard, not to them. So that's a way to handle or deal with that. When we take care of a client, we're doing remote monitoring, we are not able to actually log onto the machine without confirmation from an employee. So we can't see the data unless one of your employees goes and activates it for us. So
Okay.
Those are, and that's an important question because there's a lot. We were just dealing with a company that was looking for CMMC compliance in Dayton. And one of the problems they ran into was all of their information was stored at the MSP, the managed service provider, the remote IT company. They didn't have any security standards. They didn't have any policies. They were never going to get because their servers were backed up there. Their Office 365 was backed up there. So all of their information was backed up to this location and it didn't have any of the requirements. So that's one of the things that we are putting together and we have is this list of companies that can help meet these requirements that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Ken, this is Rick.
Yes.
You want to mention also that, again, most of the cloud service providers typically have 3 levels of security. In fact, I think for level 3, you have to use the most expensive service than, for example, that IBM or AWS provides.
Yeah, there is different levels of enhanced security. And like Office 365, there is a way to configure it, and we will take you through that to be CMMC compliant with all of the required security standards. And Microsoft will work with us and with you to get to that. So yes, AWS, all of them are going to have the security standards, but every time you step up in security, so an example from Microsoft, you'd be looking instead of $12.50, it's $20 per license per month, but you'll get that enhanced level of security. So yes, when you're talking about the really large players, they do have different security levels in place that you can take advantage of. And you want to make sure that you're getting that information and you're meeting those higher security standards. But again, one of the problems with CMMC is there's always additional cost every time you put in additional security. So expect that with everything that you do. So let's take a couple minutes. Everybody always asks me this question. What about maturity level 2? So if you're maturity level 1, you're allowed to see federal contract information. If you're maturity level 3, you can see CUI control. I really need to go look that back up because my brain went blank. But level 2, they admitted in the training, they don't expect anybody to actually, they have it on their list of companies that certify level 2. They don't expect anybody to actually ever certify at level 2. It's supposed to be a stepping stone from level 1 to level 3. They expect most people to be level 1. The next majority is going to be level 3. Level 3 is going to have the most controlled information. And then level 4 and 5 get closer and closer to being able to have secret and confidential. And so, yep. Thank you. Controlled, unclassified information. You'd think after reading that 1,000 times, my brain would keep it, but I keep getting confused for some reason. That's what happens when you get old. Don't get old. But so if you're asking the question, what about level 2? It really was only put in there because they didn't want to go from 17 practices to 130 without at least having something in between. But I don't think anybody I've talked to is even considering getting certified at level 2. It doesn't really get you any advantage. The step to level 3 is going to be where you need to go. But if you do need to kind of step your way up there, you could go through level 2, get yourself practice with it, and then do level 3.
Ken?
Yes.
Could you give us a quick example of CUI, for example, for a manufacturer?
So some of the things that are CUI, and each contract will predefine it, but information, if it's like a proprietary screw, that's one of the things they talked about. The dimensions for that screw that you might make for an airplane, that's controlled information. So if you're doing something for, and now this is an important thing, you don't have to certify if you are selling an off-the-shelf item. So if you make a long rod and you sell that rod to companies, you sell that rod to home, and you sell it to the federal government, you don't have to have a certification to do that. As long as you don't modify it for the government and it is commercially available for any other person to buy, that's called an off-the-shelf product. So, but if you are customizing that product for the government, because it's customized, it's controlled information. So if you make a specific rod that is a certain length that you only make for the government, that information would need to be protected. I don't know if that answers the question, but so there's that, there is information, a lot of it comes from the government, so they might send you a blueprint. If they send you a blueprint that they expect you to build to, that would be controlled information. If you create a blueprint for the government to use, that also becomes controlled information. And I will tell you, if you create controlled information, and I just went through my training confirmation class for this, there's special labeling that you have to do to have controlled information. So I'm not going to get into depth on that here, but that's what controlled information is. So if it's related to some process within the government, some controlled products within the government, anything that is unique to the government that they would not want anybody else to know about is controlled information. But the good news is all controlled information will be labeled controlled information from the government. So if you get a document, it has to say CUI on it. And again, if you want, I can get you what those CUI labeling requirements are. We have that information. I won't go in that deep today. But that's the good news is, but if you create something, you want to ask your contract representative if it becomes CUI. Because as soon as it becomes CUI, you have to make sure that it's protected because that's what they want to protect. So I just wanted to take a few seconds and talk about practices. We said there are 17 practices for level 1, 130 for level 3. What the heck is a practice? So the first thing is it's what the government expects you to do to protect the FCI CUI. It's defined as a domain, then a maturity level, the series number, and the description. So maturity levels build on themselves. So these 17 practices are going to be required at every single level of the CMMC. So level 5 has the same 17 practices as level 1. It just has additional practices on top of that. Level 2 builds on level 1. Level 3 builds on level 2. Level 4 builds on level 3. Everything builds on the one prior to it. Yes. So in the chat are the controlled, unclassified, and federal contract information designations. So that's what it's all about. They're going to look and see where is this information contained versus who has access to it. Here's an example. Limit information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users or devices, including other information systems. So this is in the access control domain. It's a level 1 maturity level, and it is 001. So it is the first one. And what that basically is telling you in a very confusing cyber nerd sort of way is that you need to make sure that your employees are only able to get into what they should get into. You shouldn't have, and we're all guilty of this, we make administrator level access for everyone. And I've seen this in small companies because it's easy. Everybody can get to every file. That way you don't have to worry about who has rights to each file. That's not allowed. That's not accepted. And so what happens is you want to make sure that you minimize it. The other thing, and this is a big one for a lot of companies, is no shared accounts. You can't go in and be like, okay, we're going to have all our interns have one intern account. And so because you can't track who it is, you can't control who's getting into your system, and you can't have identification. So those are the types of things that happen. And I want to take a quick second here because I want to show you, we have built this sheet that has, and we use this when we engage to do a CMMC project. It kind of says what the actual CMMC requirement is, and then kind of a more common sense meaning underneath it. Because that's what it comes down to, is trying to make it as straightforward as possible. So let me share this with you quick and you can see. So hopefully this is big enough, but there you go. So this is access control, level 1, 001, limit information system access. Then you have access control, level 1, number 2, limit information system access to the type of transactions and functions that the authorized user is permitted to execute. So if you have somebody that is in the operations field, they should not be able to go in and run payroll. If you have somebody in payroll, they should not be able to go in and change your inventory control system. So that's what this is saying. And then underneath, you'll notice it says meaning, restrict users to a minimum level of access they're required to do their job. And this is an important one. Assure that transfers, terminations have an adjustment or removal of rights. So if you move from accounting and you go into marketing, you should still, or no, I'm sorry, if you are in accounting, you move to marketing, you should not have your right to the accounting folders the day you've been transferred. So you need to make sure you're keeping that up and keeping that clean. Because again, now that you're in account or marketing, you don't have any reason to be doing anything in the accounting systems. So those are the important pieces. Yes, Ron, you look like you were about to ask something.
Yeah, a quick question. I didn't want to interrupt you while you're talking, but so I just wanted to ask you something. So years ago, I was at a company where when we went to do payroll, the person in accounting that had that role, they had a separate account. So they, like if it was Ron 1, they'd go to Ron 2, and they'd use Ron 2 and only gave them access to payroll. So my question is, are you allowed to do stuff like that? Are you allowed to have one person have multiple accounts that would be based on their, based on the transaction they're trying to do?
You can have one person to multiple accounts. You cannot have multiple accounts. You can't have multiple people to one account. The big goal with the accounts is, so if you logged on as Ron 1 and Ron 2, I can still, if Ron 2 went and infected the computer with ransomware, I can still come back to you and have you responsible. But if you were on and Ann was on as Ron 2, then I wouldn't know who actually caused the infection. Okay. So that's the goal when you put this limit, and that doesn't fall under the access control, that falls under the identification authentication. But what that says and does is, it says one person needs to be able to be responsible for the behavior on the system.
Okay, I think I understand. So you can do that type of thing, and it does provide some security, because when that person is not logged in as Ron 2 in my example, so they no longer have payroll access and they're using their normal account, which is, let's just say, accounts payable or something. So, okay, just curious. Thank you.
And that's a great thing, because I'll tell you, and IT administrators are really guilty of this. I have been in the past too. So an IT administrator will give their primary use account administrator level rights, because it's easy. I don't have to go and swap when I need to make changes. But that's a really bad practice, because your account as an administrator has far more access power than it should for doing your daily things. Like you said, you don't want to be able to run payroll necessarily in your daily operations. That way, if somebody got my daily action account, they don't get the administrator access. They don't get the keys to the castle type of conversation. That is, there was a statement that you can have people having multiple accounts if they cannot get to the CUI information. That is true, but as a general cybersecurity rule, if you talk to cybersecurity people, it's a bad practice to have people share accounts, because if something does go wrong, you cannot find who did it. So even though it is only required for the things that are in CUI, but we're going to talk about that because that actually brings in the conversation of what's called a walled garden. And you have to be very careful that they can't get to it if you do that. So, okay. So I wanted to take a moment. We talked about processes. So this is the actual processes. The whole point of a process is to make sure that you actually will do the practice. So there are no processes at level 1, but I'm going to tell you, level 2 basically says that you have to have a policy for every domain, and that your practices have to be implemented in that policy domain. I'm going to suggest, even if you're only looking for level 1, you should have policies. It is very important to have written down what you expect people to do. And the other thing I'm going to say is when you do a policy, make it as simple as possible. How many of you have those employee handbooks that are like 350 pages long and nobody's ever read them? And the problem with this is when they come in and audit, if they ask to see the policy, they're going to want to see that it is either electronically signed or shown that the person has actually seen it. So if you have a policy that's sitting on a shelf, they're not going to consider you mature. So it is better to do policies at level 1, even though you don't need them, because then you have something to go back on if there's a problem in the future. And then this is this here where it says level 3 managed. Establish, maintain, and resource a plan that includes all of the domains. The big thing they kept telling us is resourced it. There's a lot of companies that had these great cybersecurity plans, but they didn't give it money. Oh gosh, time really flies. We have 10 minutes left. Okay. I'm going to keep moving forward. If you have questions, please ask. So I want to take a moment. I always called the POA&M, plan of action and milestones. I can't think of his name, but he always said on Popeye, I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today, Wimpy. This is what the government no longer wants. They don't want to have, they're not going to certify you if you say, oh, well, we don't have a password policy in place, but we'll get that. We'll put down a plan and a milestone to get us to that. They're not doing that because that's how people got servers sitting out in ITAR compliance. You can't do that anymore. You have to have it in place when they come in the door. So don't bring on the third-party auditor until you actually feel you're ready for it. Because unfortunately, you're going to get dinged and there's very little wiggle room for the auditors. So if you get dinged, you're dinged. And then you're going to wait several months before you can go and try again. And don't do last minute deployments. Don't see, let's say, okay, in August, I'm going to try and get certified. So I've written up all my policies and I told the employees about it. They're going to interview the employees. They're going to find out you talked to them 2 weeks ago and they're going to say, you are not mature. You have everything you need, but you're not mature. We'll come back in 3 or 4 months. But they're going to charge you for that audit. So don't spend money to find out you failed. Make sure you find out you failed as much as you can. And they're going to want to see proven performance. They're going to want to see they don't have a defined number of months makes proven performance. So I've been suggesting about 6 months would be a good indication of proving performance. Really quick, because we only have a few minutes left. The auditor, they're going to look for 2 forms of objective evidence. They're going to interview, they're going to want to actually see, and they're going to want to review the policies. And when they review the policies, they're going to be looking for things like, do you have dates when people have agreed to it? When was it last modified date? When was it last reviewed? And have those been updated? And this was something when we were working with the auditors for NIST that we were told is make it as easy as possible for these people. Give them their information in a very easy to read format as quickly as possible. When we do our policies, we actually put the individual practices numbers with exactly as it appears so they can go through and do a checkoff. The faster they get through it, the less questions they ask, the more likely you will pass. Okay, really quick. This is one of the things I always tell you, start where you're strong. So if you've already kind of done the physical access, if you have a sign-in sheet, if you have cameras, if you've done that, let's start there, get it in place, make sure you have the policies you need and get it checked off, because you're going to do better if you have a few starting wins. If you start with something you haven't done at all, it's going to feel overwhelming. Make simple, straightforward policies, 1 page or less as much as possible. We have examples of policies that we can work with you on. You can also buy policies if you want, and then we can work with editing them. And then start simple. Do one domain. Don't try to do all of them. Get really comfortable with one domain. Some domains only have one action underneath them. We can do that quickly. It might only take a day. So start simple, have lots of successes, and then plan for taking about 6 months to get it all in place. Really quickly, and again, I want to emphasize, don't try to just do this alone. You can, but it'll take a lot of work on your part. Look for experts like me to come in and be willing to help you get where you need to be. And then, again, keep it simple, determine the minimum that you need to do. Don't overcomplicate any more than you have to. There's enough complication in the system to begin with. And then pass off where possible. And again, remember, it's about the data. So you have to show where the data is. But if you can't show where the data is or who has access to it, everything's going to have to be protected. When I told you what we were doing with the power, when they wanted to hook it up to the network, because it was hooked up to the network, even though you had all the other securities, every person in the network is going to have to be NIST compliant from then on forward. So I did want to talk, and I'm going to take a little bit of time. I know it's getting tight, but I want to talk about what's called a walled garden. And this is really important. So if you are a sub, and again, they really emphasize this in the training. If you are a sub, you might have a situation where instead of trying to get certified yourself, you have your prime put a walled garden computer into your environment. When we work with Cleveland City Council, they have a separate computer in one of the clerk's offices that is used for payroll. That's all it does. Nobody else can get to it. It's not on their system. So you could have an environment where instead of you certifying your network, you just have your provider come in, your prime, put in a walled area that is only accessible by the person who needs to use it, and it doesn't share with anything else. You can also do that within your own network. So if you have a 30-person network, but only 3 people are working on CMMC compliant contracts, you make their own little network. Now, this does take some extra effort. It has to have its own security, has to have its own firewall, has to be completely walled off from the rest of the world, but it's easier to get 3 people certified than 20 people certified. So you want to consider, how can I wall off the information? How can I keep it safe from everything else we're doing? Again, I talked about let the prime carry the load. If they want to work with you, they might be willing to come in and set up what needs to be set up so you can work with them. Again, minimize and restrict. Like I think it was Aaron that had said in the chat, you only need to protect where CUI and FCI is contained. So if you can define that very distinctly and then protect it, it's a lot easier to do. It can save you money, especially if you have a relatively large organization that doesn't do all government contracts. And then this is one that I really tell people. If you're making like $2,000 from government contracts and you're selling specific items to the government, you want to review if it's worth even doing it. I mean, I hate to say that. I don't want to close anybody off from the federal government. It's the world's largest consumer. But at the same time, if you're paying thousands of dollars to maintain a certification and thousands of dollars to put in extra security, and you get $2,000 out of it, is it worth it? And that's why that first conversation about walled gardens and letting it to the prime, if you're working with a prime and you make $2,000, let them put the computer in. It's worth it to them to get that access. Any questions on this? This is really important in how to move forward. So I wanted to take some extra time. and just be sure that we pounded on this. And this walled garden is so important because it is a way to reduce the cost of getting certified. Okay, I'm going to hit this really quick. These are the different levels that are expected to 2021, 2022, 2025 is the full rollout. I think there might be some adjustments because obviously nobody expected COVID to be in the middle of that. But you'll notice they have this 4,700 in level 2, but nobody expects them to be there. Most of the people will be level 1 and level 3. So you can expect that. Odds are you're not going to be one of those 28 companies unless you're a Fortune 500.
Hey, Ken,
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure before anybody has to leave for their next meeting that you get a chance to offer the
Yes.
folks.
That's what I'm doing. I'm going to pound through all of these. So we won't do that last quiz. So if you can take this survey, let me paste it out here into the chat. There's a chance for $50. Priscilla won the last one.
And there was also the consulting time.
And yes,
I
so
don't know if you covered that already.
So, and we'll, where did it go? It didn't pop up here. Okay, apparently that slide got lost. So we are offering, and we're lucky enough that through the CARES Act, we can offer up to 10 companies, and one of the companies has already taken it, cybersecurity, but if you sign up now and we do it before September, so it's 15 hours of cybersecurity consulting. And you just have to sign up as a small business, which is 500 employees or less in Ohio. So it's not that small of a business. And you get about $3,800 in value, 15 hours of our time. And we can use that to start moving towards your CMMC compliance. So it can save you a lot of money. So that's.
Sorry about rushing you through.
I know
those last two, but I did want to make sure that folks knew that there was a nice offer on the table, not only the chance at $50, which everybody should jump on, but also the for the companies to be able to get started, or if they've already started, just have somebody come in and just see how they're doing, give them a good checkup. I want to thank everyone for participating, and as we'll do more often, sometimes the topics that we cover are complicated, and so we break them up into different levels for everyone so that you can participate in the level that most corresponds to where you are as a company. But again, thank you, Ken, for participating and sharing this information. And thank you to Rick Earls and entire Team NEO team and the Smart Manufacturing Cluster for supporting these webinars. Now with that, I'd like to thank everyone. Last things from us. And hope to see you at another webinar soon.
And I did put into the chat the SurveyMonkey link. So if anybody wants to grab that, Priscilla won last time. So it's $50. But yes, contact Ron or myself for that free 15 hours. Take advantage of it because we are going to be offering it elsewhere if you guys don't use it. So the sooner you sign up, the sooner you get it locked in.